General Weygand has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Welcome to the Lead Pursuit Podcast, a podcast covering Blood Red Skies, a game of World War II aerial combat. I'm your host, Doug Glover, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts Chris and Brett for episode 1 of Lead Pursuit, the dreaded introduction. Hey, Chris. Hey, Brett. How things going, guys?
Hey, going pretty good, man.
Hey, happy to be here.
Awesome. We're glad to have you guys on the show today. Today's going to be a little bit of that horrible thing all podcasts have to do, which is an introduction, an overview, and talking about things that people may not want to hear about. But you know what? We're going to talk about ourselves for a little bit. So today we're going to talk about how we got into the game, what our background in Blood Red Skies is, what our hobby background is, because some of us have come from other gaming systems and other miniatures efforts. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some real world background, and then finally get into our choices inside Blood Red Skies. Specifically, are we playing Axis? Are we playing Allies? And which of the air forces and why? Because I think there's a lot of interesting choices that we've made figuring that out in the first couple months of owning the game. And really, it drives some of your hobby choices for the rest of your time in the game. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Chris real quick to talk about the choices you've made, how you ended up in the hobby career that we are with Blood Red Skies, and what your background is.
So, well, just a little background on me. Former Marine aviator when it comes to being an air crewman in the back and getting yelled at by pilots and shooting machine guns. Nothing more interesting than that. But that's actually where I know Mr. Doug Glover from. So we crossed paths many times in Marine Corps. But when it comes to gaming, I was your typical D&D kid who transitioned to Warhammer when he was young and joined the Marine Corps and kind of got away from all gaming, and then got sucked back in through the process of computer gaming. And from computer gaming, it pulled me back into Warhammer. I'd play a lot of Horus Heresy. I paint a lot of miniatures on the Horus Heresy side. I'd say that I'm much more of a painter than I am a war gamer, to be honest. But I do like to play. And that's
just your excuse when I beat you.
So it is. So, I mean, because I don't know the rules, but I still paint better than you. But
rules are advisory as long as your army looks good. Nobody cares.
Absolutely. But yeah, I played computer games, and one of the computer games that got me into a sense of community was a game called IL-2 Sturmovik. And it was a World War II flight simulator that when it started just dealt with the Eastern Front. By the time it finished, it covered all aviation for World War II. And I did that. I drifted back away from computers and back into wargaming, and then along comes Blood Red Skies. And it's kind of got a mix of what I really enjoyed learning from aviation and aviation history and playing flight simulators, and then the game mechanic that I'm used to with Warhammer. So something similar where I'm painting my own stuff. It's just fascinating to paint my own aircraft.
Absolutely. That's one of the funny parts for me is getting to choose and pick and have some guidelines about what aircraft should look like. But there's just such a wide diversity of each different air arm, each Army, Navy, Marine Corps style aircraft, and the paint jobs that may look similar but are slightly different as they were interpreted by each Air Force.
Yep. And that's one of the things that led me to the Russians. I mean, it was just an easy choice for me because there's so much that you can do with the Russian Air Force that you can't do with some of the others because of Lend-Lease and because of the ramshackle way they kind of put things together in World War II, and it just makes it really interesting.
Well, and that's one of the warnings I'll put out to the listeners out there is that we are not rivet counters. We're not grognards. We're not... we're details guys. We try to take care and make our models look good, but if you're going to judge us based on the tone of my blue paint on top of my Wildcat, I'm going to be guilty. I will have probably used the wrong one. And
hey, and you know what I've learned? Warlord isn't exactly Grognard Ripper counters either, because I got my Lydia Litvak model, and they have a picture of her airplane supposedly on their website with her as an ace painted with the airplane painted on her little counter, and it's somebody else's airplane. She never flew white 5, I learned. She flew yellow 44. So we're not the only ones in it. Some of that stuff gets it gets lost in the shuffle and what looks cool and everything else. So
well, and to be honest, that's why we're doing the podcast. Is we're enjoying playing the game. We enjoyed modeling for some of the game, we're talking about it. So, Brett, why don't you give us just a little bit about your hobby background and real world background, and then how you ended up suckering all of us into playing Blood Red Skies. I mean, how you ended up getting into the wonderful game of Blood Red Skies.
Somehow I think a lot of that is my fault. Of the three of us, I am the latecomer really to tabletop gaming and everything. I mean, as a kid, I was super into painting and modeling scale models of World War II aircraft. And when I think back, mostly American bombers. Those are the things I can remember. Like, I'd paint them all up and I'd hang them from fishing string in my bedroom. And I had, it looked like the Air and Space Museum in my bedroom. And I kept doing that. And not claiming that I had any great skill or anything, but it was something I just, from my childhood, I remember as great joy. But I did that, probably through college, but never really returned to that since until, probably 10 or 12 years ago, a buddy of mine introduced me into the World of Games Workshop stuff and Warhammer 40K specifically. And it took me back to that happy place. What it really reminded me of was the joy I got as a kid, both painting scale World War II fighters and bombers and the occasional pewter D&D mini I'd get out of a case somewhere at a hobby shop and paint up horribly. But now, going back 10 years ago, with internet and everything else, just the amount of resources available to actually develop decent technique, it became a hobby for me. And I've been painting. I can't say that I'm much of a gamer, but I do greatly enjoy collecting and painting different models. And then when we all went to Adepticon here recently, I was just really interested in I didn't know much about the game at all, but I knew we'd have a chance to see Blood Red Skies at Adepticon at the vendor hall. And I was just curious really about the scale aircraft game. I hadn't really seen it before other than maybe pictures and stuff on the internet occasionally. But anyway, so I led you guys into taking a look at it with me. We had the chance to play that demo game, and it's all history from there.
Yeah, it's all downhill. And
I just went for free pizza, and now I have miniatures.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even supposed to be here today. So yeah.
Chris was super reluctant. I think Doug was all in with me, but Chris came along though once he saw us playing. I think.
Exactly. Once we suckered you in. Well,
so I'll tell you a little bit about my background beyond that. So that's my hobby background. Not much to say there other than, I've really enjoyed painting and collecting and stuff. So perfect candidate for falling down the, bunny trail for Blood Red Skies. But personal background, I'm also a veteran. I'm a veteran in the Army. And that's how Chris and I hit it off some years ago at that same Games Workshop store. We would see each other and commiserate on painting and stuff like that. So we just kind of naturally hit it off. And for the last few years, as you know, Doug, we've all been getting together to play tabletop games here at the home. As I mentioned before, we traveled together to Adepticon recently, and that's how we got this start going for Blood Red Skies.
Yep, it's two Marines and a Ranger walk into a bar is how most of our stories start.
Pretty much, it starts like a joke. Well, no, that's good. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you guys giving the listeners that background. For me, my background is similar, a little bit more diverse than some of the gaming side. I spent a lot of time playing D&D, playing a lot of different war games from Avalon Hill and SPI. So anything World War II and Pacific was already definitely in my wheelhouse. I loved that. And probably about the time I graduated high school, went off to college, I found Warhammer 40K. A friend of mine down at school showed it to me, and I'm like, wow, these are cool. These are really neat miniatures. I kind of liked the game back in the Rogue Trader era that was a cross of role-playing and tabletop board game. So, fast forward 3 or 4 years, all of a sudden, I too joined the Marine Corps and became super busy and stopped playing. I joke that I stopped playing miniatures war games longer than Brett has been playing. So that my 18-year hiatus there, by having a busy high tempo job, I kind of got back into it, especially towards the end of my career, as you're trying to figure out what hobby is going to take up all your time once you're on the other side. And started painting again and playing Warhammer 40K, playing Horus Heresy, and hanging out with Chris and Brett. And then obviously this time ending up in Adepticon, Brett says, "Hey, let's go look at this game called Blood Red Skies," which, quite frankly, I'd looked at. I skimmed through a lot of the miniatures news on a weekly basis, and I was like, seems kind of interesting, no big deal, and I loved it. And so why did I love it? Well, part of my background is I spent most of my 20 years in the Marine Corps flying F-18s as a weapons systems officer, sitting in the back, making sarcastic comments and generally trying to do my job. But I'd also spent a lot of my wargaming years playing games like Air War and some of these really, really detailed aerial combat games. And they weren't fun. I mean, it was great to sit around and hang out with friends and play the games, but I don't know if either of you guys ever played any of those. Those were, you had a long tracking list of your energy state, your airspeed, your altitude, all these things that you had to keep track of. And it was just not fun to play. It
sounds like just a bunch of bookkeeping.
Yeah, it was too much bookkeeping. If you've ever played like Starfleet battles, same level of bookkeeping, actually probably more. And it was not fun. So when I got suckered into playing Blood Red Skies, thank you, Brett, I really enjoyed it because it had the flavor of aviation, and it had some things that made it feel like at least the maneuvering system and some things were somewhat based in reality and not just out of a movie. But as I've started playing it and started practicing playing some of the games, there's some depth there, and it's fascinating to me. And hopefully in the next couple episodes, we'll take some time and we'll explore what I've found about some rules of dogfighting that do play in Blood Red Skies and some things that don't play in Blood Red Skies. But I think Andy Chambers has definitely done an interesting turn on World War II dogfighting to make it a lot less record keeping and a lot more fun.
I thought it was Hellcats and Corsairs that got you hooked.
Well, that was the second thing. So, yeah, being a Marine, I'm pretty much a sucker for anything that involves Guadalcanal or involves later, evolutions with the Black Sheep, or if you say, Corsairs over Iwo Jima, I'm. So that didn't help either. That actually leads me right into the next section. Thanks for the segue. Where it was going to be, what faction are you playing? What nation or what are you doing? Or if you're Doug and you're stupid, which two air forces are you playing? So I'll lead off with that real quick. As Brett alluded to, I did pick up U.S. Marine Corps aircraft. I couldn't do that. I couldn't skip on that as a good U.S. retired U.S. Marine. So I bought a box of Wildcats and just recently got my pre-order of Corsairs, and they're a lot of fun to work with and to paint up. We'll see how they play on the table. But I originally had thought, all right, we'll split a box set. And Brett, thanks for splitting the box set. That was a great intro, easy way to start the game off. And it got me started with the RAF. And I've never been a big expert on the RAF. I always knew a lot about U.S. air power in World War II. When it came down to the RAF, I've had to do a lot of learning. So not just paint schemes, but all the different marks of aircraft. And I used to not be able to tell different marks of a Spitfire apart, and I'm not sure I still can. but I'm getting there. So I ended up choosing the RAF, and we'll spend some time in later episodes talking about how the RAF plays in the game, since the initial episodes are set around the Battle of Britain. But I've also picked up, P-51, so I can do some U.S. Army Air Corps kind of stuff and play with that. Chris, what about you? Who did you pick up?
Well, and I told you, I got into this partially. One of the things that pulled me into Blood Red Skies was that game IL-2 Sturmovik. And when I played that game, it was the first time that computers kind of became a real community when it came to computer gaming. So I actually we have a squadron. I'm still friends with all these guys. We still have a squadron ready room that we hang out with on a virtual ready room online. Still friends with all of them. And it was, like I said, an Eastern Front game. So it brought my focus at a point in my life where I had a lot of deployed time and a lot of reading time. Brought a focus for me for the Eastern Front of World War II, which is something me as an American, I didn't study as a child either. And I got completely hooked. I got hooked on what went on between the Russians and the Germans and what an amazing, just throwing of manpower and material against one another that was, and something that we don't study a whole lot. And then when Blood Red Skies came along and you told me you were basically going to play Allies and Brett was thinking about playing Axis, I was like, well, I kind of leaves the Russians and I'm good with that.
I thought it was just because you were so cheap you wanted to keep buying everyone else's Lend-Lease miniatures and calling them Russian miniatures.
Hey, and that's a BOGO too, man. It also helps that the Russians painted their airplanes any damn way they wanted to, and anytime they had, with whatever color paint they had at the time.
Exactly.
So you really have got a lot of latitude when it comes to paint jobs right now, which is something I'm really enjoying with it too. And the Russians are they were a fascinating air force. They came out of, in World War II, they had just come out of the purges where Stalin had basically wiped out their entire officer corps. So they were starting basically from square one when the Germans attacked them with their air force, and they built a pretty amazing thing. And it's really interesting what they did. And and the first ace in the game for the Soviets in Blood Red Skies was Lydia Litvak. And a lot of people in the world still don't know that there's a female fighter pilot ace out there, and she was it. I mean, so there's some really interesting aspects to it that are just fun to do. And I will admit, I love the Lend-Lease idea because there's very few aircraft that are completely off the board when it comes to fixed wing monoplanes out there that you can't play as the Russians, because the Brits and the Americans were feeding them aircraft through the entire war, and they were flying Spitfires, Hurricanes, Warhawks, Airacobras, along with all of the stuff that they were building. So it's just a fun air force to build and play.
Brett, what about you? Who did you pick and why?
Well, I was immediately drawn to the Luftwaffe. So the starter set, I was really hoping you'd be down with splitting that with me and would let me take those Luftwaffe planes. And that
Absolutely.
Really the colors, I think that's really the main thing. I just like the lines and looks of practically all of the Luftwaffe aircraft. And I like the fractal pattern camouflage. I don't even know that's what it's called, but you know what I mean? There's something aesthetically very interesting to me about all the Luftwaffe aircraft. So that's really what it was for me, really just rule of cool. So I picked up Luftwaffe. I've since built, the 109s from the starter kit. I've got a squadron of PF-110s complete. But knowing that you were super interested in the Marine stuff, I also grabbed a squadron of Zeeks. So I'm painting them now, actually. So I'm gonna do all Axis. I'm gonna do Luftwaffe and I'm gonna do Japanese.
Excellent. I'm so glad that I suckered someone else into having at least two different nations they're playing. I thought I was the only idiot.
If you don't think I'll be playing Marine airplanes here at some point, I've had Pappy Boeington and the Corsairs in my checkout cart several times, but it's like no, focus on one thing. You don't need to do the same thing with other hobbies that you've done and do it with this hobby where you've got more miniatures than you'll ever paint.
I'm already there, so it didn't help. And quick moment of silence for the War Store closing. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
that sucked because they've been my hobby crack dealer for years. But in the process of them closing, they obviously had one of their spring cleanings, and I think I cleaned up on a lot of RAF aces, some other aircraft and things, which didn't really help my hobby progress. I think it set me back further than anything else. But at least it was an opportunity to fill up the stockpile of things to build and to paint.
Yeah, and that's one of the neat things about it too, is that it just doesn't take that long to paint something with this game. And I think all of us coming from the background of Warhammer and Horus Heresy, where it's building an army is an undertaking, and this is you could honestly, if you dedicated yourself, you could put an air force on the table in a matter of days with this game.
Absolutely,
that looked pretty darn good.
Absolutely, and to be honest, most of the scenarios you have enough flexibility that it would be 2 boxes of airplanes is really what you need, because you get counters in the starter set for your bombers. So, and if you wanted to buy an expansion, that's awesome, and still use the bomber counters, but use them for Halifaxes, use them for B-17s, whatever you get in your expansion kit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other things I just wanted to cover real quick before we end up finishing up today was kind of where where our goals were, what we're looking at in the near term, because I know we're going to get together in about a week and knock out a little bit of playing and hopefully hang around, drink some beer, and maybe even do a podcast while we're down there. But what are you guys looking to knock out in the next couple of weeks?
So, Brett, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I'm working on Zeke's right now, and I expect I'll have them finished certainly before you guys get here to play. They're pretty easy to paint, so I've got them probably at least halfway done. So I got a squadron of Zeke's and Saburo Sakai ready.
Nice.
So I'll have him ready. So
Good.
Yeah. Well, on my side right now for Russians, I've got my first set of red nose yaks almost done. I just started doing MIGs today, so I got a couple of lead MIGs from the Johnny Red box that came out here recently for Blood Red Skies, and I've got one batch of Lend-Lease Hurricanes that are half painted, and I've got my first three Russian bombers that are about 90% done, and that's the goal, is having that stuff done by next Friday, so that I've got a pretty decent air contingent of targets for Brett's Luftwaffe to shoot down.
Nice. Yeah, I know that I'm not getting my bombers finished because I haven't started them, so they're definitely not going to make it there in a couple days, I don't think. I actually was suckered in by the mosquitoes simply because of all the D-Day scenarios that were going on. They were putting up on the web, and those are cool, but none of us had really agreed to play anything past the early years. So I'm going to kind of reset my focus, finish up the last of my Spitfires. I've got 4 Hurricanes I'm going to finish up here, and then just knock out some onesies of other aircraft. So like reconnaissance variants, I've got that Spitfire done. Sadly, my reconnaissance Mosquito is back in the stripper to be stripped, and we'll see if it gets painted and primed before I make it down there just to show it off, because I've had to do a little customization on that. But I'm just going to try to knock through the last of the Hurricanes, and quite frankly, it's the Hurricanes are going fast. The slowest part of it has been it's hot and humid here in Beaufort, South Carolina, so it's not exactly where I want to be standing out in the garage doing my airbrush work. So the environment is complaining or is conspiring against me.
Yeah, it is definitely not friendly up there in the swamps.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome,
so
guys.
Let me ask you, you guys have all painted early war then, right?
Correct. I've got one late war Mustang Mark IV painted up for their RAF, and that's it.
All of my stuff is early Great Patriotic War Russian stuff, so I've got nothing beyond early MiGs, early Yaks, and the bombers, which were basically, they should have been taken out of service, but they couldn't afford to when the war started. So it's all early stuff.
All my stuff is late summer 1940, and coincidentally my Zeeks are as well. So we're all the same time frame for across the board.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any Corsairs done past Pappy's Corsair that I did the test paint job on. So I'm turning back around to the Wildcats. But kind of like I warned you, my Wildcats especially are going to look like the Rainbow Squadron, because they're going to be done in pairs. So each section, I'll have a section done for Guadalcanal, a section done for the British Fleet Air Arm, and then the other one is kind of to be determined. It's undercoated such that it could be another Guadalcanal, either Marine or Navy squadron, but we'll see what I pick there. I kind of wanted to save it for a desert Malta kind of scenario for the RAF and the Fleet Air Arm there. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and chat through this today. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll knock out a few more of these and knock out some more detail for the listeners, things that they probably care about rather than hearing about us, care about some tactics, care about learning what worked, what didn't work, and then hearing a little bit about some hobby techniques and some hobby progress and some things that work.
Definitely be doing some painting episodes, because I know for me and Brett is probably one of the best brush painters that I know. And I've been an airbrush painter forever, so we're kind of merging our hive minds, and we'll have some interesting stuff to put out the community on painting these aircraft.
And that's a perfect segue. If you haven't already, go over to our Facebook page to Lead Pursuit Podcast. Go ahead and follow us there. We'll have some of these photos, some videos when we get a chance to edit the video together with some of these techniques, showing how you can really apply a level of detail pretty easily to your Blood Red Skies miniatures that make them really pop on the gaming table.